I'm joined once again by Ian Gregory, the CTO of AdvanceTrack, and we were talking on the last little chat that we had about the fact that AdvanceTrack can act as that bridge for accountants if they need to go through that systemic change as AI starts to erode some of the compliance value, I guess, of the services they're delivering. But that does beg the question of, for the future of outsourcing, is that just a short-term play, or is there a longer-term I guess, collaboration, not only, I guess, for that transition period, but supporting firms on that longer term journey?
We certainly see that we have a future. I mean, we see all of the hype and spin around AI at the moment, and clearly we've asked the question, what does that mean for us? And we've been looking at that for several years now and come to the conclusion that there is a future. There's a future in terms of us being a bridge for our clients. So in the next few years, we'll see that working out in terms of supporting our clients through helping them with their processes, helping them to take on board AI, and providing them with human support as they reconfigure their businesses. But in the longer term, one of the things I mentioned in the last podcast is that, manufacturing, which I used to work in, they were looking at automation for decades, and 30, 40 years on, everything is still, there's a lot of manual work in there. And the reason is that having people involved in the process means that you can improve it. Means that you can spot quality problems as they appear. Means that you can actually come up with insights from the process and pass them on to the customers. So three good reasons why you still need people. And if you look at manufacturing, the people who try to automate everything, what would happen is they'd build a super duper production line. If it went wrong, they'd churn out thousands of bits of metal, which they had to rework before anybody noticed there was a problem. And I can just imagine that happening in accounting and going back to your customers going, sorry, there was a software glitch. You're going to have to change all your accounts. How long is it going to be before that risk is mitigated? And in terms of improvement, particularly if you're going beyond just the pure compliance, that there's a need to look at those processes and how you can improve. And I think what manufacturing found was even in the best automated processes, unless it was incredibly high volume and standardized product like cigarettes, let's say, it was better to have a process that had a lot of human content, and Toyota being the benchmark in that respect. And I think what we see as an outsourcer, we can effectively be a human-led accounts factory competing against purely AI ones that have strengths in some areas but weaknesses in many others. So I think there's a niche there, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how the industry plays out in that respect.
I think it's a really good parallel when you start talking about manufacturing, because essentially what happened with that whole boom in manufacturing is that a lot of what was done, I guess, say in the UK, was then offshored to a different geographic region where it was more cost effective to deliver that, but still keeping the very customer-centric face in the UK. And the structure of how that was delivered, and it became very much more an international way of delivering, I guess, a service, a good, a supply. And we're very accustomed to that with manufacturing, but less so with service. And I think that's something that will evolve. And although you may be, a bridge, pretty much a lift and shift, this is the service we're delivering, we're just moving that offshore for a time being whilst we get our structure in place. Elements of that I still think would remain. And it may be that there's, support, for example, like if they've got software or just general query support, that may sit in an AdvanceTrack, but some of the more kind of regular one-to-one meetings may sit locally. Is that something you could envisage happen, that, paralleling what happened in the manufacturing sector, the whole dynamic of the way accounting service delivered gets structured, split up and spread out into different geographic regions?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at manufacturing, when people first started out offshoring to China, it was because they're cheap. And
Yeah.
now actually the Chinese are far better at manufacturing than anybody else. And even companies like Apple that have tried to reshore to the US have struggled. And they struggled because of things like they can't get screws, and the
Yeah.
talent just isn't there. Um, and I think if you look at what the big four accountants have been doing, they've been offshoring for 20, 30 years. And gradually over time, the sort of things they're offshoring has gone from the really basic things where cost has been an issue to actually some very sophisticated stuff. Yet they've still got big teams here dealing with the clients. So I think, a business like Advanced Track, we very much see ourselves as being a back office to support our customers as they move up market into the areas which are effectively done in the UK or the US or Australia or wherever. And we can just be
Yeah.
really good at the delivery bit behind the scenes.
Yeah, and the other bit is because you get the benefit of working with different accountancy practice, you can see what all of their individual requirements are, all their differences are, and then shape your delivery to make sure that you can pretty much service any nature of engagement. Whereas if you're working with a partner that's not necessarily used to that, then they're learning from you, and it's a much more challenging initial period as they're having to adapt to not only understanding potentially the account profession, but also the very varying different ways you work. And I think that, I guess, a big positive of this is that most people, when they're looking to offshore, they're looking for a long-term partner, and they want to make sure that you're in there not just for the short-term win, which could be large, as we're talking about that bridge, but also the long-term play and how you evolve to and adapt to supporting them as they evolve and adapt. And it sounds like you've already planned that. You already got a good vision of how, as firms evolve in the UK, Advanced Track evolves to meet those needs. Is that a correct assumption from me?
Yeah, we'll evolve with our customers, but also, as you say, we get to see a lot of customers. We get, we've got people with experience in other sectors, so there's a lot we can draw in from let's say manufacturing in my case. Equally, we can see what's going on in the Australian market, in the US market. The peaks and troughs of demand in those markets is different, so we can get economies of scale across markets. We can get economies of scale across UK accountants as well. So there's a lot we can do as a outsourcer across multiple firms that any other than the really big firms could do internally themselves.
Yeah, and you've always focused on this blend between tech and people. You've done it inside of Advanced Track, and as AI starts to take more of a hold, obviously you're going to use the tools that enable you to enhance your service and deliver more and more effectively. And what that does mean is that you can be a sounding board for other firms that are trying to do this. So maybe your services evolve, not just for delivering, supporting them with their outputs from a compliance perspective, but also potentially into an advisory element regarding supporting them on how they evolve. Now, I'm not saying that that exists. I'm not trying to predict where you're going to go, but it just, to me, makes sense because you're going to be doing that as a back office engine for so many firms that you would have gained so much insight that it kind of just falls out, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're already doing work for some customers where we're driving their clients' management accounts processes and producing the reports that they review with their customers. So some of that groundwork for the advisory is we're already doing, and we see that as potentially a growth area. There are lots of different areas we can grow into and adapt with our customers as we move forward.
Well, it's very fascinating to me, and I'm learning as we go about Advanced Track and what you're doing. So this is great, and I can't wait to the next session. We're going to dive into a specific, relatively recent release that you've had as well. So thanks, Ian, for joining us once again today.
Great, thanks very much.